Hello and welcome to Pick, Pack, Ship, this series dedicated to providing you with the knowledge and insight you need to grow your e-commerce or multi-channel retail business. I'm your host, Troy Balakhan, and joining me in the studio today is my co-host, Stephen Miller. Hey, Stephen.
Hey, Troy.
Today we're talking about a process that probably deserves more attention than brands would like to give it: returns.
Yeah, a return is a lot of things, Troy. It's a sale that's become an unsale. It's a process that's got to be followed to get the items back into inventory, at least tracked, right? And it's also an interaction with the customer. That's why a return isn't simply a lost sale. The return process is a touch point. It's an opportunity to clearly communicate with that customer.
To shape a good perception of the brand.
Think of it like every action having a reaction. A good experience with returns might not lead to a good online review.
But it might not lead to a bad one either.
Yeah, I mean, that's what a smooth return should avoid. And word of mouth and online reviews are so important these days. So many perceptions about a brand are formed outside of a curated website, outside of online ads, outside of other marketing. So if a product is going to come back, then let the return be easy, transparent, and well documented.
Well documented.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are several kinds of, documentation to be considered. Brand's return process has to be clearly defined and conveyed to the customer, both online and in any packing materials.
Do customers who want the item fast and free also want to return the item fast and free?
Good question. I mean, that's part of the balancing act that a brand has to perform, right? A lot depends on the cost of the item and if there's enough margin built into the product. Most returns we see are paid for by the end customers. I can tell you that a recent survey, the data indicates that almost 70% of consumers are deterred from buying online by having to pay for return shipping. Yeah.
And our own e-commerce survey found that 90% of respondents highly valued free returns, and that just over 60% of respondents would buy again from a brand that offers free returns and exchanges. But that's a discussion for a future podcast and blog. Okay, what's another kind of returns-related documentation?
Yeah, it's the returns guide that the Dotcom project manager develops with our partner brands during the onboarding process.
Okay, so those visual guides that define how a package will be shipped to a customer.
Exactly. The returns documents look very similar to the packout guide used in the outbound. Brand's guide is basically an instruction manual to quickly and reliably handle a return.
The faster a return is processed, the faster the customer gets a refund, the happier they are.
And that's why thinking about returns is so important. Now, let's take this a step further, right?
Okay.
The Dotcom returns department, the team, the dedicated team, follows defined business rules for each sales channel.
How to handle e-commerce returns, how to handle B2B returns.
Right. There are work rules that deal with returns at a high level, and within those defined work rules are SOPs for each brand. Those are the specifics for how each brand's returns will be handled.
So describe how those returns are handled by our current partners.
Well, it depends. Yeah, but it's pretty logical. Each return gets looked up by order number or some other identifiable customer information like part of the address or the customer's name. And if the package shipped from our facility, I assure you we will find and process it. Each return has some level of inspection. Each return has some level of disposition.
Disposition.
Yeah, figuring out what to do with an item after it's been inspected. Does it go back to stock, sent to scrapped, reserved for liquidation? Will it be refurbished, either by us or by a third party? So we handle all of those things. For instance, we do an electronics brand. We return to stock what we can, basically the packages that haven't been opened when the box is in good shape. And the packages where the box has been opened, those items get stacked on a pallet to be sent out for refurbishment.
And we do some level of refurbishment here.
Of course, a number of apparel brands rely on us to refurbish their items. So after inspection, we might lightly clean an item, retag it, rebag it. This is more likely for individual B2C returns than larger B2B returns from a store for that apparel brand. What we do is always based on the guidelines that the brands give to us, and that's, we follow what they tell us to do.
What about health and beauty brands?
Well, it depends.
It always depends.
Look, I mean, there's some basic categories of things we do when we get a return, right? We can do anything within those returns categories. The nuance is what we service, and .com can pretty much service whatever the brand defines.
Yeah, I see it. I get it. You see it all the time on the warehouse floor.
Yeah. So for beauty brands, you also have these two categories of returns, right? B2B and B2C, right? So B2B returns, they get inspected for packaging, expiration dates, lots, and things like that. And then a determination is made about whether they're going to go back into stock or not. B2C, well, they're the ones where we'll do an inspection and only return to stock unopened items. Opened items where the seal is broken, that goes to scrap.
And the secret of B2C returns is that many brands don't even bother to have a customer return the unused portion of a cream or a lipstick or a nail polish, right? There's an expense involved, whether from the handling or if the brand pays the shipping charge. The brand just gives them a refund.
Well, and the secret beyond that is that the brands often keep a list of those people who have made returns to watch for an abuse of the practice. But a lot of this is going to depend on the price of the item, right? Look, we handle e-commerce returns from the health and beauty segment every day.
Yeah, yet not all of our partner brands use Dotcom's return service.
That's true. I mean, for one thing, there is the expense that we've just described. And the other aspect is that there's a kind of business intelligence gain from the brand handling their own returns, handling them in-house.
Right, depending on how many returns they actually get.
Yeah, I mean, there's a limit before a brand says they're going to outsource the function. But the point is that the brands get good insight into undeliverable packages, how the packages are packed, what items are being returned. There's a lot to be learned. And if we handle a return or a different third-party company dedicated to returns handles that item, the brand is just one further step away from the process.
Interesting. So there are always trade-offs. Two more things. Pre-printed return labels and RMAs.
Okay. Returns labels included with the original order and return merchandise authorizations. Well, Troy, it depends.
Predictable.
Yeah, well, in general, we see that the higher the average order value, the more likely that customers expect to have a return label included with the order.
Right.
Keep in mind, these orders are blind to the brand. They don't see them until they hit our dock and the return shows up in the returns reporting.
Gotcha. The client web portal.
Correct. And as for an RMA, that information will be fed into our system and the return is essentially matched to an inbound PO, a purchase order, like we've talked about when we've discussed the receiving function.
I remember it.
Yeah. So one of our partner brands, a higher-end apparel brand, uses RMAs for their customers, and that's their requirement. That's how they control the returns process. That's how they can maintain good insight into the reasons for a return.
Thanks for listening to Pick, Pack, Ship. If you're an e-commerce brand and you have a question for us to answer, shoot us an email at podcast@dotcomdistribution.com. Like, share, or leave us a comment on your favorite podcast app, on YouTube, on social media, or wherever you're listening from.